Conversations this morning on breakfast between Chloe Swarbrick and Shane Jones. Many people seem to be calling him Shame Jones. That seems to have stuck. It's quite clever. And they were talking about, I guess, climate in general, but also looking at the marches over the weekend. Now, we haven't really talked about the marches over the weekend for climate, but this is all incorporated into this conversation, so this is the time to get to it. The beautiful part about this conversation was Shame Jones wasn't there for the first half of it, and it was just all Chloe.
Phenomenal question, Daniel. So this is one of the many...
Sorry, I should have probably said what the question was. They're addressing, what do we do about addressing the current energy security issues? In other words, we get told a lot that if we don't have enough oil or enough fuel, there's an energy security that we then become insecure. So that's the question that's been asked.
Lines that those who have been lobbying for the fossil fuel sector have been using for a really long time now. If we're talking meaningfully about energy security, then we need to be investing in renewables. Here in Aotearoa, approximately only 2% of households have solar panels on their roofs. In Australia, it's 30%. And if we had that equivalent, we could shut down the Huntly Power Station tomorrow. The Greens went to the election campaign in 2023 with our clean power payment policy, showcasing how we could do precisely this by using actually funds from the emissions trading scheme from our biggest polluters in this country to pay for decarbonising our households and ultimately actually also reducing energy bills.
So there is one small gap in the conversation. I think Chloe does cover it off because there is a lag, right? Because what Chloe is talking about is 30% of the households being covered in solar panel, and currently there's 2. You're not going to have 30% tomorrow, so we're not cancelling the Huntly Power Station tomorrow. So the conversation we also have to have, and I do think in the next clip, Chloe kind of covers off on it a little bit, is the movement towards this. And the question therefore is, we can't turn off the fossil fuels today, but what is the path to get to 30% whilst we're turning it off? And I actually don't think anyone really is having that conversation. So in other words, the way the electricity grid's working right now, the electricity generation's working right now, does need to continue. What this government is doing, which is wrong, is they're now offering, oil and gas contracts around the world that might last 30 years. Now, on one hand, coming up to the election, Luxon was talking about short term. And I remember you and me talking about this, Chewy. There is no company in the world that's going to look for a short term return on the investment into gas or oil, right? So they're looking for a long term return. So we're having it both ways. We're having, I guess, our people, the people that kind of agree, say we need to get to renewables as much as we can, but we have to acknowledge it's not tomorrow. So we need to have some kind of fade in and fade out at the same time, that cross over each other. But the government is saying, yeah, we're going to double the energy renewability production whilst opening up oil and gas fields to international companies who will want it for the long term. So there's lots of mixed messages here, Chewy.
Yeah, absolutely. All of these guys should get their head around the stuff that we're staring down the barrel of scarcity and enormous price spikes, and just putting us at the whims of getting fuel from one place to another, all the way down here at the bottom of the world. I think when we're looking at the things that some parties want to acknowledge and some don't, building some energy resilience in this country should be a much, much higher priority. And you can sell it to people. You can go, look, it's going to lower your electricity bills. It's going to make you more resilient in a disaster.
Yeah,
I think, as much as I was a fan of the clean car discount and that sort of thing, and getting more EVs on the road, what that money would have been better pointed at was getting solar panels on people's roofs, getting batteries into their homes, and that I am still to this day stunned that there is no legislation mandating solar panels on new builds. It's fucking mental.
Yeah,
we need to do that micro generation. So we in the bigger generation, but like I noticed that there's a wind farm and a solar farm all moving ahead here in the South Island. That's great, but we need to do that to build that supply, that resilience, and get rid of Huntly and put us less at the whims of the international situation.
tell me, am I wrong? I understand that all of the South Island's power is renewable. Is that correct?
Yes, we export more power than we use. Technically, the national grid, it goes both ways, but
Yeah.
my understanding is that there has never been a moment ever that there. Oh no, I won't say never, because we did have the brownouts in the mid-90s when the
Yep.
hydro lakes were very low. Is that because Auckland's such a big black hole for power? This is why Huntly exists, is that they can spin
Yeah.
it up in a short amount of time to cover those spikes in power usage. But yes, the hydro dams generate, I think it's more than 2/3 of New Zealand's power requirements.
Yep. Okay, so the conversation then goes on to address a little bit about the things we've just been talking about, because they're talking about what happens when there's a rapid movement to green or renewable energy. That's what I've got to say.
Critics argue, Chloe, that transition too quickly to renewables could lead to higher energy costs and instability. So how do you propose to balance rapid decarbonisation with ensuring affordable and reliable energy for New Zealanders?
Well, again, I'd just say look at the data, look to the experts and look to the evidence, which shows that, in fact, renewables, especially if paired with investment in battery and storage, actually is ultimately cheaper for households, but also improves that energy security as well.
Yeah, but that doesn't quite answer the question yet, because it's still a long-term vision. 30% of the households long term. So what would the we all agree. I agree with what Chloe was saying. I've always said if I ever built a house, I'd want to put solar panels on the roof, and I'd probably want to sink a tank in the ground as well for some water security, should I want that as well. But this is one of the moments where we love Chloe's research in that, but I want to hear a real answer as to what is the result. Like, how do we do this and move rapidly? The research is good, but give us some tangible things that are as like a meat axe like me can understand as well.
As saving our planet in the long run. But this is actually a point that I would put to the government, because they are talking out both sides of their mouth here. They went to the election, and as I understand it, their policy is still in place to double renewable energy generation in this country. Yet on the other side, they also want to reopen oil and gas drilling. Those two things are fundamentally inconsistent, least of all with commitments that we made internationally at the COP just last year in November to triple renewable energy generation across the world.
We heard the Minister over the weekend saying that 5 million people want to keep the lights on, but yet we see tens of thousands of people protesting over the weekend. Is he reading the room correctly, do you think?
Those two things are not inconsistent. For a really long time now, the majority of our electricity generation has already come from renewables. But investment in renewables has stalled because the incentives have been wrong in the way that we have set up the economy around electricity generation. And I'd also make the point that the government also cut initiatives for efficiency of energy in the most recent budget as well. So these things simply do not add up. And to put it to you another way, Daniel, look, the government's telling us that they don't care about the climate, they don't care about the environment, they don't care about the future, they don't really care about our international agreements. You'd think maybe they would care about the economic prospects here, yet faced with the economic opportunity in renewables, they're effectively deciding to say that in an age of Netflix, they want to back DVDs and Blu-ray.
That's a good line. That's a good line. Credit where credit's due. I'm also thinking, Joey, maybe you can tell me to pull my head in, but the messaging needs to be, Chloe is great at having all the information in her head. I'd like it delivered to me in a bit more of a meat axe way. We talked last week about Tuku Morgan talking on the 30 program with Guy and Espita, and he talked about Māori rights being different from non-Māori rights. And then he said under the treaty. And so, of course, what has happened, and we said this would happen, didn't we, is Hobson's Pledge has clipped that, and it doesn't say the words under the treaty at the end. It just says Māori rights are different from other people's rights. Finish of the clip. So we do need to think and be careful about messaging, because all that's going to now do. In fact, I can't remember where I sent you the clip, Joey. I can't remember where I saw it, but on that Twitter feed, it's all just like, elite Māori. Oh, sorry, I pronounced that incorrectly. Elite Maori and that kind of stuff all the way down. So it just feeds into that.
Yeah, it was so predictable.
It's really unfair, because we should be allowed to be clear with our communication, and we should expect honest actors on the other side not to clip it. But I want to hear information given to me. I'm a moron, right? I need moronic conversation. Talk to me like I'm a 9-year-old boy, because that's normally how I'm acting anyway. And I still don't have a clear answer from Chloe about how we're going to get there and how we're going to move rapidly into it, other than when the need to move rapidly. You know what I mean? There's just there's a part of the equation missing for me to be able to put full weight behind that. Yes, we want to move there quickly. How?
Yeah.
Not quite. I don't quite know yet.
So what I see you saying there is like Chloe's really good at describing the place that we need to get to.
Yep.
And some of the mechanics of how to get there, but not all of the mechanics.
Well,
like
she might be. She might. No. Let's give her credit. She might be fucking fantastic at explaining it. Just in that clip, we haven't quite got there. Like, so she might have it exactly written down. I'm not. No discredit whatsoever.
Yeah. No. Absolutely. Yeah. It's a two-phase thing, right? You need the bigger generation. So like the solar farm, I think it's something like 30 megawatts of a solar generation is being built in the Mackenzie country in the South Island. There's also a very big wind farm being built in Southland. Those are the sort of things that are important from a national grid point of view. And then the other aspect of it is what I spoke about, the micro generation, the getting solar, the individual solutions, people storing their own energy is a big part of the problem, big part of the solution of what we're looking for. Like, we have an enormous amount of electricity generation from the South Island, from our hydro dam schemes. Like, when we talk about the think big projects of the 80s that almost bankrupted the country, like, and Marsden Point was one of them, and it was all about energy production in the 80s. So although that almost bankrupted the country, we've been living off that for decades now. It was a good call. And I love pointing out the fact, and I saw this in the news end of last week, at TY Point, the aluminium smelter. We've given Rio Tinto another bribe to stay on, because we want those jobs there. Those jobs those bribes are just billions of carbon credits for them to stay in the country.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that whole aluminium smelter is plugged into a hydro dam of its own that isn't connected to the national grid. So we've made a choice there, haven't we? Successive governments have made a choice that those jobs at the Rio Tinto plant in TY are more important than adding that hydro dam into the national grid, as an example.
Something interesting actually about that, I'm just looking it up. There's about 1,000 full-time equivalent employees and contractors that work at the smelter. About 1,000. I don't want to see anyone lose their job, but when this government is so keen to cut the number of jobs around the place, tens of thousands perhaps, certainly multiple thousands, I wonder what it is that they're so desperate to protect 1,000.
Oh, I can tell you. That's 1,000 jobs out of Invercargill and Bluff.
Right.
Those are not good places. Like, not big places that would gut those towns. And I think there is an aspect of it of like, yes,
Rural
we
New
do
Zealand.
need to think about that. Like when we look at again in the late 80s, when these rapid changes, when you had forestry jobs go and freezing works jobs go, and you absolutely cut the hearts out of towns to the point where they took decades to come back. Hopefully we learned those lessons from that. I'm not a fan of Rio Tinto. I am a fan of 1,000 people in Southland having jobs to provide for their family, but maybe there is a point where we transition that to a different job.
Isn't it interesting though that the government of kind of free market ideologues are not letting the free market decide that particular situation or others?
Oh, absolutely. Like, every time the contract comes up for TY, it comes out, oh, we're pulling out, all of these jobs are on the line. And then the government swoops in, because that's the bargaining chip, right? The government wants to keep 1,000 jobs going in Southland. Rio Tinto know that. So they use that to put the government over a barrel to get carbon credits.
All right. Do you think that Shane Jones possibly is a furry in his private life?
Oh, Jesus Christ.
I just
That's
wonder, because he
something-
is so very, very keen to talk about unicorn kisses. He talks about it a lot. And in the 6 minutes he was on this morning on breakfast, of which probably half the time was his, he probably mentioned unicorn kisses 3, maybe 4 times. And something just says in my head, when someone says it that many times, maybe there's something more going on to this messaging. Here's a part of the conversation when the minister joined in, where they were talking about 20% of our current electricity usage relies on gas.
Oh, look, the reality is 20% of the current electricity system depends on gas. We destroyed our sovereign risk profile with that unwise, shallow decision of 5 or 6 years ago. We're going to go ahead with changing the law. Oil and gas exploration, if we can entice further investment into the sector, is going to build resilience. We can't get any more sun and wind within a short period of time unless we pass the fast track, which sadly was opposed by the Lotus Eaters yesterday
What
over
an
the weekend
asshole.
in Queen Street.
But Minister, given the urgent need to combat climate change, how can you defend the reversal of the oil and gas exploration ban when it directly contradicts New Zealand's international climate commitments?
New Zealand is at an inflection point. Do you want the lights to stay on? So if you do you want to use natural gas, an indigenous resource, or do you want to rely on Indonesian coal?
An
That is what is
indigenous
happening
resource.
as we speak. The power you and I take for granted every day is now being created by Indonesian coal. It's not being created by unicorn kisses, as the Green Party would have you believe.
Yeah, there's one. So that's a good freeze frame as we get back to Clovis Warbrick. So he said that 20% is dependent on gas. So, of course, what does that mean, Chewy? It means there's another 80% to make up the conversation. And that's pretty much where Chloe goes straight to.
Look, the Minister himself has just admitted that 80% of our electricity generation comes already from renewables. He is inherently recognising that we already have that reliance and therefore that there is the potential to expand it. In addition to that, he repeated misinformation when it comes to the Indonesian coal. Those coal exports are at a 30-year low as of metrics from last year. But on top of that, actually, the majority of the coal that we produce in this country cannot be used at Huntly Power Station. It is a different grade of coal. And he's also using that in order to rationalise more oil and gas drilling. These things do not add up. It is not a rational argument. So again, I'd make the point that only 2% of households in this country have rooftop solar panels at the moment. If we were to meaningfully incentivise, like they do in Australia, where they have 30% of their homes with rooftop solar, we could close Huntly tomorrow. That would result in more energy resilience, but also in cheaper power bills for New Zealanders across this country. It's a win-win also for the climate.
Yes, true. I've got one more clip to play you, which is Chloe speaking directly to the minister. But before we get to that, is there anything you want to add in on?
Oh, Shane Jones is a blowhard that loves the sound of his own voice. He loves using $5 words to make him sound smarter than he actually is. I love the whole thing of like, oh, we're going to talk about Indonesian coal because I know that my New Zealand First voters are all racists. And then I'm going to mention an indigenous resource
gas
to make it sound like I'm doing something good for the country. Like oil and gas drilling, like these guys know that if these guys are like our current government are out in one term, then why would you bother investigating? Why would you come and drill here? Because the next government in is going to turf them back out again. And I think that very clearly needs to be stated by all of the opposition parties that they are coming for this. We have obligations. It is binding agreement to try and bring our emissions down. And we won't sacrifice our agricultural sector, which makes more money than oil and gas and mining ever fucking would. Like it's the bedrock of our economy. But Shane Drill Jones thinks that we're going to strike it big on oil and gas. No, we're not going to make any money out of that. Those companies are going to bring in outside contractors and they're going to they're going to put us over a barrel and they're going to squeeze us for royalties. We are not going to be the Norway of the South Pacific and allow oil and gas exploration, but absolutely wring every dollar out of those companies for our own social programs and our own people. Absolutely, I have no faith in someone like Shane Jones being able to go toe to toe with a mining company to get those royalty concessions. Absolutely none. And Chloe quite rightly identifies that transitioning our energy industry is a win-win for everyone.
Yeah.
There is money to be made,
except for the people.
There is money to be.
Well, not for the companies who want to come in. There's not money to be made for them, and maybe that's a part of the conversation that I will allude to. That maybe there's something else behind it for some of these MPs. Maybe it's not a win-win for them in the form of donations and lobbying.
No. Shane Jones fucking corrupt as hell when it comes to the mining companies. He's not even bothering to hide it anymore. So yeah, it's not a win-win for Shane Jones.
It's a win-win for us.
And that is a win-win. That is a win for us. That
for us and the country.
That anything that disadvantages Shane Jones, I am all for. But look, with a developing industry like renewables, like making solar panels, like making batteries, there is money to be made from a business point of view. Being in an emerging market, it is a license to print money if you get it right.
Yep.
It is a win for the consumer because you are more resilient and you are saving money. And it is a win for the government because of those things and because it helps us hit our climate commitments that we have made. It's Shane Jones is an idiot. Just clip that part, put it on YouTube tomorrow.
So this is the last part I want to play you, and I've actually already taken a clip today and I put it up on TikTok and stuff. So I'll play it to you off TikTok because then you've got the actual words that come up with it. This is the part of the whole conversation where, to me, it seems very clear that if they haven't done it yet, they are loading up to break another promise. This national government promised to double the output of renewable energy. So in other words, to put investment in that would double the output. So however many kilowatts we're producing at the moment of renewable energy, this government promised to double that. And eventually Chloe got a chance to speak straight to Shane Jones, and she asked him this.
Can I just ask a direct question to Minister Jones? Does the government still stand by its policy to double renewable electricity generation in this country?
Obviously, the government sees a mix and match. We'll have more gas, hopefully lessening our reliance on coal, but we are not going to rely on windy rhetoric or solar dreams.
Shane Jones knows his gas.
Without having a nation that generates solvency and hard-headed economic outcomes. End of story.
I will let the New Zealand public make up their own minds on that nonsense.
Shane Jones.
So there you go. And he got out his unicorn kisses again. I did also think maybe that the best place to find indigenous gas might be on the 9th floor of the Beehive after a big lunch in the cabinet room. They might get quite a good source of indigenous gas there.
I think the thing that strikes me the most about Shane Jones is when he goes on these big tears and the things that he's talking about and the way that he's talking about it. It's old. Like, these are the sort of comments that you would see in the late 80s or 90s about any green movement. You know, it's all about fairies and unicorn kisses and just all of this wishful thinking. And I think a lot of people are past that. Like, Shane Jones has his fans. They probably carry around one of those little plastic pill dividers that you've got to take like 17 pills every day. That's how you tell you're in the Shane Jones fan club. What I'm saying is you're old.
The ones that are too young for Winston Peters, you know, the 70 and the 80-year-olds that are too young for Winston. They're not
rational thinkers. They're going, oh, I love it because you're sticking it to the Greens. They're not listening to anything that's been saying, just like those same people haven't been listening to anything anybody who's been saying about the climate. And I tell you what, if you want to find out about the climate, maybe get in your motor car, which won't be an EV, head to the West Coast. Have a look for those glaciers that you used to go to when you were a kid. See where they're at now. Like, this is not something that's up for debate anymore, as far as I'm concerned. Like, when it comes to voting for this stuff, this is the number one thing for me. that they have to be serious about the climate. Now, all of the people that are voting for Shane Jones and cheering him on, they don't have to worry about the climate. Their time is running out, but they have grandkids, and their grandkids are going, this is fucking important to me. And those grandkids were probably at that enormous march in Auckland this weekend. Now
Very good.
that was up there as far as numbers.
Yeah.
Hundreds of thousands of people. Some of the most just top shelf science I saw. I'm going to put up this one that I saw just before we went on air. 5+ a day, eat the rich.
Yeah, I saw someone criticizing Marama for that because she was holding it at one stage. Obviously, someone who had it got a photo with her and she held it up. Like, yeah, it's pretty funny.
No, like if you've got a choice, you know, what's that guy from that shitty toy company that was in the news today, being New Zealand's richest person, the Mowbrays from Zuru
or something.
Yeah, so they were putting him up as example.
The ones feeding a shit ton of money to independent right-wing media. Those guys.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely damaging the democracy of this country. Absolutely damaging the planet with their shitty plastic toys that are just landfill bait. And they're putting his company up as this New Zealand success story when he's the founder, but he's not the owner. It's a Chinese company now making Chinese plastic shit. Like, the man's dreadful. So, like, if we have the option, like, what do you reckon has the most effect? Us sorting our recycling every week and putting it in the right bin on the side of the curb, or eating a billionaire every now and then? I reckon that the math on that is going to hold me up to be correct on this. There's no such thing as an ethical billionaire.
What's the fat content like on a billionaire?
Oh, well, depends on how you cook it. Maybe slow roasted.
All right.
But yeah, like, people get caught up on this eat the rich. It's like, I'm not encouraging necessarily cannibalism. But maybe if we eat their wealth, we spread it out, we don't have that obscene amount of wealth. Like, I was talking about this with a friend of mine the other day. Like, you know, if you were a billionaire, I couldn't even comprehend that amount of money for a couple of reasons. It's an enormous big number, and I'm not a good numberer. But the other part of it is there's a point where you just run out of stuff to buy. And it's just ridiculous. And you get up and you fire up a news website and you look at something in the world that's horrible, and you look at this big pile of money that you've got, and you just go, I wonder if some of my money would help that. And these guys go, nah, I'm going to keep it.
Well, or they look at causes that may be detrimental, as we would see the world, to society, and they do fund it. That's the other thing as well.
Yep,
So.
Absolutely. No such thing as an ethical billionaire. I don't know. I don't care what causes they support. If he has $1 billion, not ethical.